It's that time again, folks. It is time for me to do another flight controller roundup. And this time, I'm rounding up all-in-one flight controllers. There are so many of these on the market right now. Some of them have a PDB, some of them have an OSD, some of them have a video transmitter, some have all three. There are so many, I would not blame you if you had a hard time figuring out which one to buy. I had a hard time figuring out which one to buy, and I have been researching this for quite some time. I've got 16 all-in-one flight controllers in this roundup. I have meditated and studied and looked at spreadsheets and talked to manufacturers. I've got all the details I could get, and I am going to try to give them to you in the most digestible format I can so that you can, just by watching this video, know confidently which of these is the right one for you to buy. Let's get into it. What is an all-in-one for the purposes of this video? And I'm telling you this because you may have a board in mind that I didn't include and you're wondering why. And there's two reasons. Number one, maybe it doesn't fit the criteria that you see on this slide. And number two, I might have just overlooked it. I did my best to get all of the ones I could think of that fit this criteria. And I'm already right now thinking of one that I didn't include. Just this moment thought of it. Oops, I did my best, and that'll have to be good enough for now. Here are the boards in this roundup. We've got the SIRIN, the OMNIBUS F3 Pro, the OMNIBUS F4, the KAKUTE from HOLYBRO, the KIWI from Flying Lemon, the Furious FPV KOMBINI and RADIANCE flight controller combined with the Passado video transmitter and OSD board. In case it wasn't clear, they don't have to be a single board to count as an all-in-one. If it's two boards that easily integrate without a lot of soldering and nonsense, we'll call that an all-in-one. The FLYPRO tower from HobbyWow, the RACERCUBE from Banggood. I don't know who makes it, the RACERCUBE from Banggood. There's the SP3 Evo when combined with the Cleanflight OSD board. There's the HGLRC F3 V3.1 Pro, say that 3 times fast. There's the KISS all-in-one. There's the Raptor 390 tower, the BRAINFPV RE1 combined with the MPDB, and the TBS POWERCUBE and FPVision, or FPVision. The TBS POWERCUBE includes ESCs, video transmitter, OSD, and flight controller. The TBS Elite Bundle leaves out the ESCs and comes in at a lower price point. And then finally, there's the Betaflight flight controller. Now, some of these are not quite on the market yet. And I'll tell you why I chose to include those, even though they're not quite on the market yet. One is that if it weren't for the Passado, Furious FPV wouldn't be represented here at all. And I thought, when is the next time I'm going to do this? It's a little unfair to just cut them out entirely because the Passado is not quite on the market yet. And I have actually been flying with a pre-production version of the Passado on my Rampage build for a little while now. So it's not as if it's complete vaporware. That being said, the features of the Passado may change slightly between now and the time that it hits the market. And so if you finish this video and you're thinking a Passado is for you, you're going to want to double check that the things I've said have continued to be correct before you go ahead and lay down your money. The KISS all-in-one is, frankly, I think even more preliminary than the Passado. I've seen some pictures of it on the internet, and I got one sent to me. I requested one and got one sent to me. Thank you very much to the folks who sent it to me. So I can verify that at least one of them does exist in the world. But it's really hard to find solid information about the specs and the pinout and all the details because it's not a marketed product yet. And to be quite honest with you, the main reason I'm including it is because I didn't want to leave a major player like KISS completely out of this roundup. Kind of the same reason I put the Passado in for Furious FPV. That being said, the KISS all-in-one is in here, but it's not hugely represented just because there's not a lot of information I could get about it because it's so preliminary. The Betaflight F3 all-in-one is another one that's not out yet, but it's too important and too significant in the market to leave out. It's definitely going to come out before I do another roundup, and we can't just leave it off. No date has been announced for this yet. I do have preliminary pricing of about $40 from FPV Model, and the specs have been announced by FPV Model on their Facebook page. So I feel fairly confident including it in the roundup, but you can't buy it as of the day that I'm releasing this video. Let's run through the boards now, and we're going to start with boards that don't have an ESC or a video transmitter. This is the OMNIBUS F3. It has the Betaflight OSD on board. It has an SD card reader, 8 motor outputs. It is Spectrum satellite capable, and it takes up to a 5S battery. Some caveats about this board include that it doesn't have a current sensor, it doesn't have RSSI input, although with Betaflight 3.1 it will have RSSI input, and the layout is a little unintuitive, especially this header over here on the right side. This is not just a servo header. What exact pins are what in here requires you to refer to a pinout diagram, and it would be very easy to make a mistake while you're wiring this up. The price for this board is $35 if you buy it from a legit vendor, or $23 if you're a terrible, terrible person and you buy a clone from Banggood, you horrible person who's taking food out of developers' mouths. How dare you? The OMNIBUS F3 Pro is basically the same as the OMNIBUS F3, except that it adds current sensing. The way that it adds current sensing is a little bit unexpected. Most boards that add current sensing incorporate the PDB into the board, and that can have all sorts of problems like increased noise, and also if you look at the KOMBINI, for example, it can be really complicated and difficult soldering task to get all those wires soldered up to the little flight controller board. Very easy to make a mistake and smoke the board and waste a lot of money. The way the OMNIBUS F3 Pro does it is it does not incorporate the PDB. So then how does it do current sensing? The way it works is you wire the battery up to one side here, and then you wire the PDB on the other side. So your red wire comes up here, and then the red wire goes out here to your PDB, and then your ESCs wire up to a traditional PDB. And what that results in is that current flows through the board past the shunt resistor, allowing the current sensing to occur, even though this board is not actually handling the PDB function. That's a very clever thing that the designer of this board has done. It allows you to get the benefit of the current sensing without necessarily having to deal with all the electrical noise and so forth that comes from putting a PDB and a flight controller in the same board. The OMNIBUS F4 is an F4 version of the OMNIBUS. It has a Betaflight OSD. One of the key things about it is that it does not have an SD card reader on board, at least today. Today it has 16 meg of data flash, and for me at least, an SD card reader is really the gold standard, but I'm a pretty heavy black box guy. For many people, 16 meg of data flash is plenty, and for many people don't even do black box, they don't even care. If you go with 16 meg of data flash, know that you will get maybe 10 minutes, maybe 20 minutes of recording if you really slice it down. Like if the only thing you wanted to see was the stick movements, you could get maybe 20 minutes of recording, maybe a little bit more. But practically speaking, 5 or 10 minutes is what you're going to get out of a 16 meg data flash under most conditions. And what that means is that when you get ready to record, you're going to erase the data flash, you're going to go fly, you're going to land, you're going to download the logs, and you're going to see what you got. You're not going to be able to fly all day, and then the one time something interesting happens, know that you had the log. And you're not going to be able to fly all day and know that you have the stick overlay for all of the video that you shot that day. I'm happy to tell you that a version of the OMNIBUS F4 with an SD card reader is coming soon. I have official permission to announce that to you. It's not out yet, but it is coming soon. And when that comes, I think this board will be a little bit more competitive, at least by my standards. This is the HOLYBRO KAKUTE. HOLYBRO, the same company that made the Shuriken 180. Was it a 180 or a 190? I don't remember. They made that little yellow copter that I flew and did videos for. Well, they've got a flight controller out. And in fact, not just a flight controller, they've got an all-in-one PDB OSD. If you want something without a flight controller, that's not in this roundup. I'm just telling you about it. But this is the HOLYBRO KAKUTE. It is a flight controller. It's got an OSD, but it is running Multi-Wii OSD, not the Betaflight OSD. We'll talk about the differences between those a little later in the roundup. It can connect to a Spectrum satellite, and it can take up to 6S voltage. It does not have any black box capability whatsoever, no SD card reader, no data flash. Of course, you can always put an OpenLog on. That's a little bit of a hassle, and the OpenLog device only goes so fast. Especially with Betaflight 3.0, it's logging so much data that you really can't log at a useful rate with an OpenLog device anymore. You're oftentimes down to 500 hertz or even lower, at which point the Nyquist limit on the data that you're capturing is so low that you're really getting a lot of aliasing and a lot of distortion of the data. You really need an SD card reader or a data flash chip to really do black box in this day and age. The KAKUTE has a 60-50 gyro, which is good from the perspective of noise, but it only goes to 4 kilohertz because it is an I2C or I2C connection. That is less relevant than it used to be, since in this day and age, on an F3 board, Betaflight itself is preventing you from going much above 4 kilohertz anyway. Many F3 boards can run 8K gyro, 4K PID loop. This board is only going to run 4K, 4K, and that's probably not a huge difference. I wouldn't reject the board just based on that if there were other reasons why I liked it. I really like the edge pads on this board, which are great for direct soldering, and that's how I do most of my builds these days. I don't find through holes to be super ideal for direct soldering. If you put the wire through the through hole, then when you solder it, it can be a little hard to get it back out again. And if you do have to rework it and you pull the wire out, then it's hard to get the next wire through the through hole. So I always end up laying my wires on top of my through holes anyway, at which point it's a little tricky to keep them from overlapping, and so it's a little bit of a hassle. These edge pads are really great if you're going to direct solder. This board is $36. This is the Flying Lemon KIWI. It is an F4 board. It does have the Betaflight OSD on board, and it comes with a stackable PDB with a current sensor. It is spectrum satellite capable, can take up to 5S power, and has 16 meg of data flash, but no SD card reader. Now this is a really nice product, and at a price of $54 might seem compelling. I do have to point out, though, that if you look at the Two Pineapples diversity module for Fat Shark goggles, Flying Lemon are not exactly known for keeping stock, or sometimes they ship out of Poland and the Polish postal service is not the best. I'm not saying that, they said that. So there are sometimes problems with getting stock and getting it delivered to customers. However, at the time that I'm making this video, I did just go check, and it is in stock right now. This board is in stock right now. You can order it. So I feel like I have to give you the caveat, and you decide how much that matters to you. This board's $54. This is the HGLRC F3V 3.1 Pro, and I don't know who any of those people are, but if you go search for that, you'll find this on the internet. This is a flight controller. It's got an OSD. I'm pretty sure it's a multi-Wii OSD, but I couldn't actually confirm that. I'm pretty sure if it was Betaflight OSD, we would already know, so I think it's MWOSD. It does have a built-in PDB with current sensor. It is 6S capable and spectrum satellite capable. Pretty slick. It does have a 6500 gyro, which is it's the slightly less good one. It's slightly more prone to noise, especially on a board with a PDB built in where you've got a lot of electrical noise. This might be an issue. I'm not going to say it is going to be an issue, but it's more likely to be an issue. And it doesn't have any black box functionality at all. No SD card reader, no data flash. This is similar in concept to the KOMBINI in that it combines a PDB and a flight controller. But unlike the KOMBINI, it has big shared positive and negative pads. And so the KOMBINI has a separate positive and negative pad for each of the ESCs. This one has just these big wide pads, which really makes things a lot easier for the average person trying to solder it up. This board is $42. Here's the SP Racing F3 and Cleanflight OSD/PDB. Now the SP Racing F3 Evo is not an all-in-one. It's just a regular F3 flight controller with an SD card reader on board. But when you combine it with the Cleanflight OSD/PDB board, it actually stacks right in there, and there's these two pins right here which stick up and connect to it, and it's just dead simple to combine them, and that's good enough for me to call it an all-in-one. This is a flight controller. It has the Cleanflight OSD. It is currently the only board that I know of that runs the Cleanflight OSD. It's got a PDB, SD card reader. It's got 8 motor outputs, spectrum satellite capable. One caveat is that it does have the 9250 gyro. The same things I told you about the 6500 gyro on the previous slide apply to the 9250 here. The 9250 is the same as the 6500, but it adds a magnetometer and a barometer. If you're into altitude hold, then this might be the board for you. But many of the people who are watching this are not interested in, they're basically interested in acro flight. One bonus of this board is that if you buy it, you are putting money directly into the pocket of Hydra. That's Dominic Clifton, who is the creator and the primary developer manager of the Cleanflight project. And that is certainly a very, very worthy endeavor. This board is 28 pounds for the SP3 Evo and 33 pounds for the OSD and PDB. And I have no idea what that is in dollars. You can convert that to your local currency if you so desire. Here's the BRAINFPV RE1 and the MPDB PDB. And just like the last board, these are separate boards, but they stack on top of each other to create an integrated unit, and that's good enough for me to call it an all-in-one. This is a flight controller. It has the Brain OSD. The Brain OSD is a custom OSD that was invented for the Brain. The Brain was originally intended to run D-Ronin, which is, by the way, one of the advantages of this. If you buy this board and you want to try D-Ronin instead of Betaflight, then you can give it a try. The OSD here is basically been designed to be a superset of the Betaflight OSD. So this board originally was designed to run DRONIN, but Betaflight got so super popular that the developers were like, well, let's do it. And they basically run Betaflight inside a virtual machine inside the flight controller. Something like that anyway. When you use this board, you've got the Betaflight OSD, but then you also can access the functions of the Brain OSD. And there are some pretty cool functions of the Brain OSD that I'm going to show you later in the presentation. This board has a PDB with a current sensor, 16 meg of data flash. It has either 6 or 8 motor outputs. That's 6 motor outputs if you're running Betaflight, or 8 motor outputs if you're running DRONIN, and it is Spectrum satellite capable. The board does not have a gyro from InvenSense, which is the company that makes the gyro chips that basically all the other boards use. And when you hear about the 6000, the 6500, etc., those are all InvenSense product numbers. This board uses a Bosch gyro, and it's kind of an unknown quantity. Obviously, the developers of this board think it's great, but there aren't thousands and thousands and thousands of people flying it like there are all the other boards. And so could it have some hidden quality that makes it not good? We can't rule that out. There's also no evidence to suggest that that's true. The BRAINFPV is $79 and $25 for the MPDB, which gives you PDB and current sensing. This is the Betaflight F3 flight controller. It's an F3 flight controller with Betaflight OSD. It's got a built-in PDB and current sensor, an SD card reader, and 4 motor outputs. Caveats include that the SD card holder, it's not a standard, like full-size SD card holder. If you look near the inductor labeled 3R3, the SD card holder is that little silver metal thing to the left of that, and basically just the very end of the card seats in there. And it seems to me like that would really increase the odds of losing the SD card in a crash. If I were flying with this board, I would definitely try to find some way to retain the card, maybe a little bit of electrical tape or a Velcro tab or something like that. That being said, I'm sure that Boris and other pilots have been flying with this, and it seems like if this was an issue, they would have discovered it. But then on the other hand, sometimes issues like this are overlooked in testing. So the other caveat about this board is that it's not yet released. FPV Model have released the specs for this board on their Facebook page, so I do feel confident that when the board is finally released, this is basically what it's going to be like, but we just don't know when that's going to be. As a bonus, this product does support Boris B. I say presumably on the slide, but I actually have checked with FPV Model, and the gist of it is that Boris is getting some kind of compensation for his participation in this product. And I think we all agree that's a good thing. Guys like Boris and Dominic Clifton over on Cleanflight side do a lot of work on these projects and don't really take a paycheck. So, when there are ways that we can compensate them, it's always a bonus. Another bonus of this board is that it has been designed with D-Shot in mind. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't other boards out there that might or might not support D-Shot, but this one is designed to support D-Shot from the beginning, and so if that's something you're interested in, that certainly gives this board an edge up. D-Shot is still a very, very preliminary feature, and I haven't actually been using D-Shot in this presentation at all, because it's so preliminary that it's almost just not worth talking about. But this board is being marketed as specifically tuned for D-Shot, and so I thought it was worth pointing out. Price on this board hasn't been finalized, but it's in the $40-ish range, I'm told. Now let's go on to boards with a video transmitter built in, but no ESCs. And the first one of those is going to be the SIRIN FPV. The SIRIN FPV is a flight controller. It has Betaflight OSD on board. It has a video transmitter, an SD card reader, 6 motor outputs, and Spectrum satellite capable. One caveat of this board is that it doesn't have a voltage regulator on board. You cannot provide this board with VBAT. You have to give it 5 volts. And that means you're going to need an external voltage regulator somewhere, and not just any voltage regulator. The minimum is 1 amp, and it's got to be a legit 1 amp. If you have an ESC with a 1 amp linear BEC on, no, that's not 1 amp. That's just a paper 1 amp. It will brown out. So you need something good like a 1 amp Pololu, or maybe even a little bigger, and a linear supply. Just don't even bother, okay? It also doesn't have current or RSSI sensing built in, and in fact, it doesn't even have inputs for an external current or RSSI sensor. The people at SIRIN have told me that they could compile a custom firmware version that would turn UART2 into a current and RSSI input. So you give up one UART, but then the TX and the RX pins become current and RSSI input from an external sensor. Okay, that's kind of a consolation prize, but number one, I don't actually know that they've done it. They just said they could do it and they would do it if they were asked, but I don't think that's necessarily something you could download today. And the other thing is, are you really going to put an external current sensor on your copter? I mean, if we're buying an all-in-one, don't we want that built in? I don't know. If you have a PDB that has a current sensor output, maybe, but it kind of seems like a lot of hoops to jump through. Also, this board does have a 6500 gyro, although I can tell you I have it on a copter and I've been flying it and haven't noticed any problems yet. Not like I have 100 hours of flight on it, but so far so good. This may be one of the boards that doesn't have a problem with the 6500. And certainly one reason for that may be that it's not running off of VBAT, it's running off of a nice filtered 5-volt supply. The price of this one is $99, which is another sort of big consideration. That's a lot to pay for a flight controller and a video transmitter. If you compare this to the OMNIBUS F3, which is a Betaflight OSD flight controller with an SD card reader built in, it's like $37 or something. So now how much more do you want to pay for your video transmitter? If you buy premium components already, then maybe there's a combination of components you could get to that would get you to $100 and make this at cost parity. But the reality is you're paying a lot for the privilege of having the video transmitter integrated onto the board. Here's the Furious FPV KOMBINI, and when combined with the Passado, which is a video transmitter and OSD that stacks on top of it, it qualifies as an all-in-one. The Passado connects to the KOMBINI via this connector right here, so it's a simple matter of plug in here, plug into the Passado, not pictured, and you're good to go. This board gives you a flight controller, multi-wii OSD, PDB, current sensing built in, Spectrum satellite capable, 5S capable, and with the Passado has a video transmitter as well. Caveats include no black box capability at all, no SD card reader, no data flash. It's pretty difficult to solder. These pads are really small. When you're working with 14 gauge wire, they're really small, and it is very easy for someone who isn't the best solderer in the world to lift a pad and damage the board, and then $50 down the drain. So if you're not a top tier solderer, definitely think twice about working on this board. Also, the transmitter on the Passado has fixed power. It's not adjustable. So you'll buy the Passado at either 25, 200, or 600 milliwatts and then put it on there. At least that's the state of things at the time that I'm making this. Remember, I said earlier, the Passado is not actually released yet, and this may change between now and the time it hits the market. A bonus feature is that you can turn the video transmitter on the Passado on and off using an aux channel and a switch on your transmitter, making it really easy. Let's say you have to sit on the starting blocks at a race for a while things get set up. Well, you don't want your video transmitter overheating, so you can flip it off and flip it back on again when you're ready to race. Or it's just a convenient way of knowing that you can power up your copter without blasting the people next to you with your transmitter. The price for this is $49 for the KOMBINI and no one knows what for the Passado, but if I had to pull a number out of my butt, I would say $30. I made that up, but seems reasonable, right? Is it going to be as much as the KOMBINI? No, it's not going to be $50. Is it going to be $20? Probably not. So let's say $30, $35, right? Whatever. Here's the Furious FPV RADIANCE, which is similar to the KOMBINI, except it doesn't have a PDB on board, and it stacks with the Passado just the same. So you can see it's got a flight controller, multi-wii OSD, it can do Spectrum satellite, and it's 6S capable, that's nice, and it has a video transmitter when combined with the Passado. Caveats, similar to the KOMBINI, no black box capability. The RADIANCE, since it doesn't have the PDB on board, doesn't have current sensing, and the same caveats pertain to the Passado. Nice thing about this board is that it does have edge launch pads, very nice for direct soldering, as I mentioned previously. I also really like how these pads here are mounted at the corners to just make use of every last little bit of space. Very clever. Price for this one is $30 for the RADIANCE and whatever the Passado costs. This is the TBS POWERCUBE Elite Bundle. It consists of a TBS Colibri flight controller and the FPVision video transmitter and OSD. It is Spectrum satellite capable. The caveats for this board include no black box logging, no data flash, no SD card reader. It's got a 6500 gyro, and it doesn't have any current sensing. The FPVision supports live switching between two separate camera inputs, if that's the kind of thing you're into. You can control the camera OSD menu remotely, and it has the highest maximum video transmitter power in the Roundup at 800 milliwatts. Most of the others top out at 200 or 600. This is all going to sound very familiar to you when we get to the PowerCube in just a few slides, and the difference between this and the PowerCube is only that this doesn't come with the PowerCube ESCs. Instead, you're going to get an ESC adapter board. You can see the little tabs of it sticking out there, and you're going to solder it to your own ESCs. I would say that between the two, I think this is a kind of a compelling choice. The PowerCube and FPVision comes in at something like $240. So basically you're paying $90 for the TBS ESCs, and they're not even BLHeli-S ESCs. You could instead get a set of 4 TBS ESCs at like $16 or $17 a piece, and save yourself a few bucks and get what are probably better ESCs. The downside is if you go with the Elite Bundle, you don't get that integrated single stack like you're going to get with the PowerCube. So it's just up to you whether you want to source your own ESCs, whether you want to go with the PowerCube stack. The feature sets are very similar except for the ESCs. Now we're going to look at boards that include ESCs in the all-in-one setup. Almost all of these boards also have a video transmitter, but one of them didn't, so we couldn't call this boards with ESCs and video transmitters. And most of these, as you see here, are going to be multi-board stacks. This is the FLYPRO tower. It's sold by HobbyWow. It's got a flight controller, MWOSD, video transmitter, PDB, and ESCs all in one stack. So basically everything but the receiver. It is 6S capable and stackable without wires. So there's no soldering, just stacks and snaps together with custom headers. It does not have any black box capability. It does not have current sensing. That's a real shame that it doesn't have current sensing because it has the ESCs and the PDB built in. It really seems like it ought to have current sensing, but it doesn't. The video transmitter on this one is not controlled via the OSD. All the ones we've been talking about so far, you change the channel, the transmit power, the band via the OSD. This one you got to push a button on the side. You may see that as a plus. I see it kind of as a minus. I really like being able to do that through the OSD. I also couldn't figure out anything more about the ESCs other than that they're BLHeli, and that could mean a lot of things, but they're BLHeli ESCs, so that's good, right? Yeah. Presumably they're not BLHeli-S, or they would have said. Price on this one is $130. Here's the RACERCUBE. It's sold by Banggood. It is a product out of China. I don't know what company actually makes it. It's a flight controller, MWOSD, PDB, ESCs, and it's the only one to include a receiver, a FreeSky S-Bus receiver built in, just soldered right on top here. This is all of your electronics, isn't it? There's not a single thing you need on your copter. Well, I mean, motors, obviously. But yeah, this is all of your electronics in one stack. It also has an SD card reader, so my Blackbox logging heart is saved. And it includes a buzzer. It's got a buzzer on there. How many of these have a slot for the buzzer? Almost none of them. Credit to the SP Racing F3 Evo, which also has a slot for the buzzer. But so few of them they give you pads for the buzzer, but then where do you put the buzzer? It's just flopping around inside your copter. This one has a buzzer on. I haven't seen that in so long. It really is nice to see. This board doesn't have current sensing, and it's actually not, I don't think these boards stack without wires, because I don't see any custom headers or pins that would allow them to connect to each other. So I actually think they show it right here in the photo as this beautiful stack, but I think you actually have to wire it up with wires between the boards. And that's kind of a downside and kind of annoying. I couldn't confirm that, so take that with a small grain of salt. But I believe if you look online at the photos of this board, tell me where they connect to each other. I think you got to solder it up. Price on this is $65 though. So at that price, maybe it's even worth it. This is the FLYCOLOR Raptor 390 AIO tower. It's a flight controller, ESC, and MWOSD. At least I think it's MWOSD because I couldn't verify that it was Betaflight, and I think it was Betaflight, they would tell us. The other unknown about this is what type of ESC it is, and here's why there's confusion. The manual says that the ESCs run BLHeli, and it also says that they auto-detect one-shot 125, one-shot 42, and multi-shot. Now, the only version of BLHeli that does that is BLHeli-S, but you would think if it was BLHeli-S, they would have said. So, okay, maybe it's BLHeli-S, but they just said BLHeli. Maybe they didn't realize the distinction, but it's called the Raptor 390, and 390 usually means an ESC with an F390 chip in it, and the F390 chip does not run BLHeli-S. So I can't really figure out whether this board has BLHeli-S or BLHeli ESCs. If it has BLHeli ESCs, they could still be quite good. And at the price of $75 for 4 BLHeli ESCs and a flight controller and OSD, that's certainly a fair price. If it's BLHeli S ESCs, so much the better. Caveats for this board include no black box logging capability. It's unknown whether it has current sensing or not. Can't figure that out. And it's unknown which gyro chip it uses. Could be a 6500, could be a 6000. A big caveat of this board is that it doesn't have a video transmitter. So when you compare it to some of the other boards in this section that have a video transmitter and you look at the price, this is a super nicely integrated board. It's super clean, tidy, no wires. It's got that little pin header here to connect them together. But at the same time, you don't have a video transmitter, and many of the other boards in this category do have a video transmitter, as well as everything else that this board brings to the table. And here is the granddaddy of them all, the TBS POWERCUBE and FPVision. Now, the TBS POWERCUBE you know about. It is a flight controller and 4 ESCs in one stack. And it's got the cool function of actually passing current through these nuts. These nuts are actually wires. The electricity flows through them, and that's how the power gets between the boards. When combined with the FPVision or FPVision board, you get an all-in-one. All you need to do is provide a receiver, and you're ready to go. Caveats for this: no black box logging capability and a 6500 gyro. Although I have not heard of anybody having issues with gyro noise on the TBS POWERCUBE. As a bonus, the FPVision supports live switching between 2 separate camera inputs. How cool is that? In theory, you could have a copter with 2 cameras and you could switch between them in flight. More for the aerial photography folks, I suppose, than for the racing folks, but who knows? You can also control the camera OSD menu remotely. In other words, you could change the camera settings like brightness, contrast, etc. I'm going to bet that that only works with a TBS camera and not just with any generic camera, but I don't know that for sure. This one also has the highest maximum video transmitter output in the Roundup. This one goes up to 800 milliwatts, whereas most of the others top out at 200 or 600. It'll go down to 25, and it actually says 25 to 800 milliwatts, which suggests to me that it may be infinitely adjustable. In other words, instead of 25, 200, 600, 800, can you just set 37 milliwatts? Again, I haven't confirmed that, but that's what the marketing materials suggest. Maybe it's true. The price for this one, though, you better sit down. It's $140 for the POWERCUBE plus $100 for the FPVision, and that is as much as some people spent on their whole copter. So it is a wonderfully integrated setup, and it also has the TBS OSD, which has functionality similar to if you think of the TBS Vendetta, or if you've ever seen a Vortex OSD. The thing that it does, where when you power it up, it takes you through a wizard where it says center your sticks, move your throttle up and down, move your yaw left and right, and it automatically figures out your channel mapping, your endpoints. The FPVision can do that, so that's pretty cool. So this is the only board in this Roundup that doesn't have an OSD, and I almost didn't include it. And I thought, well, it doesn't have an OSD. Is it really an all-in-one? And I thought, well, it's got ESCs, and some of the other boards don't have ESCs, and I'm including them. So here it is. It's a KISS flight controller, and it's 4 KISS ESCs. It's available in either 12, 18, or 24 amp version. It's 6S capable. It's Spectrum satellite capable. And frankly, if you want a KISS setup, this is probably a decent choice for you. I said if you want KISS, then maybe this is for you, but I mean, Betaflight runs on the KISS flight controller now. Could Betaflight run on this flight controller? Well, that seems reasonable. So maybe this would even be an okay choice if you want an ultra integrated flight controller and ESCs to run Betaflight on. Who knows? And now we come to the final section of this Roundup. Final elimination! No boards have immunity. We are going to cut these boards. We are going to cut them out mercilessly, heartlessly, and see what's left. These are my opinions. They are based on my priorities and preferences. I am no longer trying to be fair or objective. You may disagree with the things I say here. That's fine. We're different people. Here are the things I care most about. I care about black box logging. I care about having an OSD. I want current sensing. I want a 6000 or a 6050 gyro, preferably a 6000 if I can get it. And I care about price. I've always cared about price. I've never been one to buy the most expensive premium thing, and I still feel that way. I care a little bit about clean form factor, but I'd give that up if I got something else in exchange. stacks without wires, and no or few micro connectors. If I could just go on briefly about that just a tiny bit more, what I don't like about the micro connectors is field serviceability and even bench serviceability. You got to keep a bunch of spares around. You can't just rig up a new one very easily, because crimping those tiny pins is basically impossible. So if you've got a board with these micro connectors, you got to keep spares around, and the exact form factor, it's very difficult to tell what it is. It's just a pain. If I have a servo connector, it's just 3 pins and I can just plug it in, or I can direct solder it. The micro connectors, I don't find them to be as serviceable. They're very convenient. When you just unplug and plug something, very convenient. I don't find them to be less reliable. They don't really come loose or anything. It's just annoying having to work on them and keep spares around. Here are things I don't care about. I run 4S. Someday maybe I'll run 5S or 6S, but I don't today. So I really don't care about that. I don't run Spectrum, and I don't care about having more than 4 motors, because I don't usually damage my motor headers. I mean, if I had that, it'd be a bonus, but I'm not going to pick a board based on it. I don't mind through-hole pins. I would prefer flat pads, but I'm not going to pick a board based on that. And I'm not scared of a little bit of difficult soldering. And then finally, the F4 processor. I kind of feel like I auto care about it, but I kind of don't. I am only going to say negative things about the boards going forward. I am only being mean here. I'm not kissing anybody's butt. The idea here is to cut these boards. And so I'm going to tell you the reasons I don't like them and why I'm cutting them. And finally, I am omitting the KISS all-in-one from this section because its feature set doesn't really compare directly to any of the other boards. And so if you want what it brings, it's your best choice. And if you don't want what it brings, you're going to pick something else, and that's that. Of the boards without ESC or video transmitter, here's the breakdown. The OMNIBUS F3 does not have current sensing, and the F3 Pro is very similar but with current sensing. So don't buy the OMNIBUS F3, buy the OMNIBUS F3 Pro. The OMNIBUS F4 doesn't have an SD card reader today. So if I wanted the F4, I would probably choose the KIWI. The reason is the KIWI also doesn't have an SD card reader, but it has a current sensor. If there were such a thing as the OMNIBUS F4 Pro, so the F3 Pro is an F3 with current sensor. If there was such a thing as an OMNIBUS F4 Pro with an SD card reader, that's the one I would buy. But there isn't. The KAKUTE has no black box at all, and so I don't want it. The HGLRC has a 6500 gyro, which is not my favorite, and it doesn't have any black box, so I'm going to pick something else in this category. The SP3 Evo and Cleanflight OSD, it does have a 9250 gyro, which I don't like, but it's got everything else really good. The Cleanflight OSD and the SD card reader and a really nice form factor and current sensing. It's almost good. It's just that there's better things in this category, I think, for the price. The Brain RE1 plus MPDB, it's pretty freaking expensive. It doesn't have an SD card reader, but if I wanted to run D-Ronin or have the super sexy OSD, this would be the one I would get. And then we come to the Betaflight F3, which has every single thing I could possibly ask for. It's my perfect board, except number one, it's not available yet. And number two, I'm a little bit suspicious of the fact that it's got the PDB integrated. Boards with the PDB integrated into the flight controller tend to have more issues with electrical noise than boards that have a separate PDB. So if we were to stipulate that this board did not have any problems with electrical noise, then this would be the one I would get. And I would just say bye-bye PDB, bye-bye separate OSD board, and just combine it with a good video transmitter and just be happy as a clam. But since this board is not yet released, and since I don't yet know whether it has issues with electrical noise, I think the OMNIBUS F3 Pro would be my pick if I were to buy today. If there was such a thing as an OMNIBUS F4 Pro with an SD card reader at a reasonable price, then that would be better because it would be basically everything I wanted plus an F4 instead of an F3. What about boards with video transmitters but no ESCs? Well, we've got the RADIANCE and the Passado. Now, it doesn't have any current sensing, it doesn't have any black box, and it's got MWOSD instead of Betaflight OSD, so that's 3 strikes, you're out. The KOMBINI plus Passado has current sensing, but no black box and MWOSD. And it's so close. If it had Betaflight OSD, maybe I would get it. If it had black box and MWOSD, maybe I would get it, but it kind of over the edge there. However, the only other one in this category is the SIRIN, which is freaking $99, and that's a fair chunk more than whatever the KOMBINI and Passado are going to end up being. So for the price of the SIRIN, maybe I would suck it up and I would buy the KOMBINI and Passado instead and deal with their limitations. But maybe the fact that the SIRIN has the Betaflight OSD and the SD card reader would make me go, nah, screw it, I'm buying the SIRIN. And it kind of depends on how much the Passado ends up being. If the Passado is $20, that's one thing. If the Passado is $40, that's another thing. For boards with ESCs, the FLYPRO tower is basically just out. It's $130. It doesn't have Blackbox. It doesn't have current sensing. It doesn't have Betaflight OSD, and the video transmitter isn't controlled by the OSD. You got to push a button on the outside of the copter. So too many negatives, too many unknowns. Look at the RACERCUBE at nearly half the price, $65 for the RACERCUBE. Okay, so it's got the 9250 gyro, and the boards might need some wires soldered between them instead of just slotting together, but it's got an SD card reader, and it's got the receiver, the FreeSky receiver built in, and it's only $65. So like that's a lot of value for that money. You give up a little bit, but between the two, I think I would take the RACERCUBE. The Raptor 390 tower might also be a good choice. Now it's $75 and it doesn't have a video transmitter, but if you have a certain video transmitter in mind that you prefer, maybe that's an upside for you. It's very clean, no wires, 2-board form factor, and if it turns out that it does have BLHeli-S ESCs, even better. The only one of these that I could really give the green mark to was the TBS POWERCUBE and the FPVision. And I went back and forth on this so many times. Like I gave the RACERCUBE the green light and the TBS POWERCUBE the yellow or even a red light because of its price. It's so freaking expensive. I couldn't bring myself to say, yes, this is the one I would buy of these. But it's such a good package. It's integrated, it's clean, it has everything, including the video, everything but the receiver. It's all super high quality components. The only thing I could really complain about it is that it doesn't have an open log, or it doesn't have a black box, which is kind of a big deal for me. But all in all, I was the only one that I just didn't feel like I would have to give anything up if I was flying it on a day-to-day basis, except for the black box logging. Okay, so between $65 for the RACERCUBE, which is kind of clunky and kludgy, and MWOSD and yada yada yada, and $250 for the POWERCUBE, I ended up honestly saying that the POWERCUBE was the one that I would give the green light to. But I waffled a lot. Okay, and that's going to bring us to the end of this roundup. So now you know which ones I would get, and hopefully you know which ones you would get. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comments. Thanks for sticking with me. Hope it's been educational. Happy flying.